The way we started this the series, and what I try to refocus us on each time that we meet for this particular class, is the revelation of Jewish values as we see them in the Siddur, and the reminder that it is not to the Tanakh, to the Bible, that we can really turn to see pragmatic concepts of our values without a lot of ambiguity to them. But it is in the Siddur where these values appear in a more pristine state. We mentioned each time Maimonides' general concept that tefillah bakashahi, the essence of prayer is request, and our central prayer for all of our 3 daily services and for all the Musaf services on special occasions and the one other time that we have one extra service on Yom Kippur and Ne'ilah is always the Amida. This is the center of our prayer, and it is a series of requests. Today, what I'd like to do is look at the Amida in terms of what the values teach us. If these are the things that we're asking of God, do you need somebody to tell you what to ask for? We mentioned that there is a time for spontaneous prayer. At the end of the Amida, as we take 3 steps backward when this prayer is finished, we stop and pause at this time before we take 3 steps forward. We are still in the presence of the Shekhinah, of divine presence. We should still be in a somewhat altered state of mind, focused on the tefillot and our prayers. We've said all the words, we've prayed, not just said, but we've had a somewhat out loud, a whispered, vocalized recitation of the tefillot. They should have impacted us somehow, and at the end, we're now supposed to pray spontaneously, from our heart, in our native tongue. Rav Nachman of Bratslav even mandated a minimum amount of time that he told his students to pray at this time in Yiddish, which was their natural language. This was supposed to be a direct and intimate contact with God. So perhaps the next question, I'm glad you asked, is, why isn't that all there is? If the essence of prayer is bakasha, is request, why don't I just get up and move my steps back and forward and then make my requests? Why do I need everything that comes before the Amida, everything that comes after, the Amida itself, Torah reading, and all this other stuff? The stuff that comes before it is supposed to lead us into the prayerful mood. The divisions we have in the morning, as we mentioned, of Birchot HaShachar, morning blessings, followed by Psukei de Zimra, a recitation from the Psalms, followed by the declaration of our faith through the Shema, the blessings that precede it, the blessings that follow this declaration in the Shema, all are leading us up to this time where it's appropriate to make requests. As it has been put, this is not a candy store counter. We can't simply walk up to God's counter, so to speak, and say, give me 5 of those and 10 of these. So what we do respectfully, so that we can set the proper tone for our relationship with God. And what does Maimonides mean when he says, tefillah bakashahi? The essence of prayer is request. What Maimonides is saying is, the Rambam is saying, this outlines the nature of our relationship with God. To whom, or of what do we make requests? Of a being that holds our fate in its hands. That's our acknowledgement that God is in control of everything by making these requests. It's not about cause and effect. We believe that the heavens will remain in their cosmic patterns whether or not we mark the cycle of the new moon's passing. We don't mark Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, in order to ensure that the cycle of the moon will continue. We believe it will. But it will be missing our partnership in the celestial event by our not acknowledging it. We will miss linking up with God by not acknowledging it. So now I'm making a series of requests in the Amida. I need them written out for me because I have to learn what to ask for. At a certain point, perhaps with your children or your grandchildren, more likely your grandchildren, children are a better illustration, you might not give them a present for a birthday or Hanukkah, but you might give them cash money. Hanukkah geld. Not 18 cents or $18, but real money, instead of a present. And the idea is that by a certain age, this child turning young adult probably knows better what he or she would want and would value the money more than what we might be able to think of or pick out as a present. But one is unlikely to hand a $100 bill to a 6-year-old and let them loose in Toys R Us, or let them loose anywhere for that matter with the $100 bill. So the idea of being given a text from which to pray, in addition to the spontaneous prayer, it's not instead of, but it's in addition to the spontaneous prayer, is to teach us what we really should want. Not necessarily what our first impulse is, but to train us for higher aspirations. So we mentioned the beginning of the Amida. If you wish to follow a weekday Amida in the Siddur, begins on page 106. We've read through the paragraphs on this page before, so we will not again, but just to review what it is that they mean, what they basically contain. The first paragraph of the Amida addresses God as the God of our ancestors and acknowledges God as being in control of all things and blesses God as the shield of Abraham. What are the requests? Class? Request number one, a subtle one. The other one is completely hidden. Request number one, a subtle one. If we bless God as the shield of Abraham, our request is for protection. There's no better way to make a request of a sovereign than by acknowledging their already extant virtue. So if you want your king to go and defend the land, you praise him as a great and mighty conqueror, and he will go out and defend the land, understanding what that means, that he is addressed as a great and mighty warrior or conqueror. The more subtle one, as we mentioned, is this is calling in God's marker. God has an IOU. God said to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, I will protect and look after your descendants. So without having that much chutzpah as to say, dear God, you promised them, and so even though we don't deserve it, we're calling in your IOU, we do it on the subtlest of planes by addressing God as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, and the one who says in here, V'zocher chasdei avot, and remembers the loving kindness of our ancestors. Well, God remembers everything, but we're pointing that out to sort of remind God. But what are we doing? We're reminding ourselves through these requests of our dependence on God. So the first thing, the first primary Jewish value is to remember it is not through the strength of our walls, but through our faith in God that we are protected. It addresses the most elemental aspect of human nature, fear. The Amida begins by answering fear. It's okay, you're afraid. Don't worry, because God protects you. And this is how you reach out to God in intimacy for protection. The next paragraph, as we talked about last time, is Tchiyat HaMeitim, the concept of immortality and resurrection. Yes, question?
Yeah, going back to the first paragraph, it's always says,
go ahead.
You will send a redeemer to their children's children.
Yes. Das is the Moshiach.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But why do you want a redeemer? Why can't God help you? Why does he have to send somebody?
I mentioned last time as we went through this in more detail that in fact the prayer books of the Reform movement have switched this one word. Even where they have reinstituted a very full-length version of the Amida, they changed the word from Mevi Goel, bring a redeemer, to Mevi Geula, bring redemption. Because they reject theologically the concept of a personal Messiah. We do have traditionally a concept of a personal Messiah, that this will be a human being, a descendant of David, and that he will be revealed to us towards an end time. He will bring the messianic time on. He will be an anointed king. He will bring us back to the Holy Land and establish world peace, yada yada, blah blah blah. Yeah. That whole routine. This is a very traditional Jewish concept, and as we saw when we went through the prayer of Lecha Dodi in one of these classes, we looked through that tefillah. Looking through the words of Lecha Dodi, we realized what an emotional concept this is, how dear this was to the hearts of the Jewish people. It is easy for us in our safety in 2002 in this safe American suburban synagogue to sit here and say, no personal Messiah, and it's redemption and a messianic era. To most of our forebears, people who clung to the faith of Judaism throughout the centuries and even the millennia, this was a concept upon which they hung all their hopes. That all of their misery and everything that